before you flush, before the handle, before the pipe disappears into the wall, someone had to deal with it another way. For most of human history, waste had nowhere to go. No system, no drain, no privacy. And the solutions people came up with, the places they went, the things they used, the workers they hired, would stop you cold if you passed them on the street today. This is the story of what happened before the toilet, and why it took a disaster to finally change everything. The oldest known toilet in the world is 4,500 years old. It was found in the Indus Valley, in what is now Pakistan, in a city called Mohenjo-daro. Every house had a toilet, every toilet connected to a drain, every drain led away from the city. They figured it out before the Egyptians built the pyramids, then they disappeared, and so did their plumbing. The Romans came next. They built latrines, public toilets carved from stone that seated up to 20 people at a time. No stalls, no doors, no privacy. You sat shoulder to shoulder with strangers and conducted your business like it was nothing. In fact, it was a social occasion. Romans would meet at the latrine to talk business, share news, catch up on gossip. But here is what no one tells you about Roman latrines. They shared a sponge. A single sponge on the end of a stick passed from person to person, rinsed in a channel of running water in the floor. That was how you cleaned yourself. That was everyone's sponge. There is some debate among historians about how sanitary this actually was. The debate does not last long. Roman latrines also had a problem no one fully understood at the time. The tunnels beneath the seats connected to the main sewer, the Cloaca Maxima, and from those tunnels came gases, methane, hydrogen sulfide, which meant that sitting on a Roman toilet carried a small but real risk of the toilet exploding beneath you. There are Roman records of it happening. When Rome fell, so did its plumbing. Medieval Europe had no sewers, no drains, no system. What it had was a window. The practice was simple. You used a chamber pot, a clay or metal bowl kept under the bed, and when it was full, you walked to the window and threw it into the street. In Edinburgh, this was so common it had a name. Gardyloo, a corruption of the French gardes l'eau. Watch out for the water. It was not water. The streets of medieval cities were rivers of filth. Butchers threw offal into the road. Tanners poured chemicals into streams. Pigs roamed the streets eating whatever they found, which was everything. In London, the Fleet River, once a clean waterway, became so clogged with waste that by the 1300s it had stopped flowing entirely. It had become a solid mass. For those who lived outside cities, the answer was a pit. You dug a hole outside your home, a cesspit, lined it with stone if you could afford it, and used it until it was full. Then you dug another one. In cities, cesspits were dug under the house itself, beneath the floorboards. When they overflowed, and they overflowed often, the contents seeped into the foundations. In 1326, a man in London named Richard the Raker fell through the rotting planks above his own cesspit and drowned in the contents below. The coroner's report survives. It is very thorough. The people hired to empty cesspits were called night soil men. They worked only at night, hence the name. They arrived after midnight, dug out the contents by hand, loaded it into carts, and carried it to the edge of the city. It was the worst job in a world full of bad jobs, and yet it was also one of the most essential. Without them, the cities would have collapsed in weeks. Night soil men were paid well. They had to be. In 1682, King Louis XIV moved the French royal court to Versailles. The Palace of Versailles is one of the most magnificent buildings ever constructed. 1,400 fountains, 2,000 windows, 700 rooms. It had no toilets, not none in working order, none at all. The palace was built without a sewage system. Courtiers, noblemen and women who had spent fortunes to be allowed to live near the king used chamber pots in their rooms, or found a quiet corner of a corridor, or slipped behind a tapestry. The gardens of Versailles, famous across Europe for their beauty, were also where the court relieved themselves when no chamber pot was available. Versailles smelled so bad in summer that the court regularly moved to other palaces simply to escape the odour. Louis XIV, the Sun King, the most powerful man in Europe, held audiences while seated on his commode. Visitors were granted access to the king on his toilet as a sign of royal favour. Being invited to watch the king use the toilet was considered an honour. By 1850, London had 2 million people, and nowhere for their waste to go. The River Thames, running through the heart of the city, had become an open sewer. Every cesspit, every drain, every overflow eventually found its way into the Thames. And the Thames was also where Londoners got their drinking water. Nobody had connected these two facts yet. In the summer of 1858, temperatures in London rose. The Thames stopped moving the way rivers are supposed to move. It thickened. The smell that rose from it was not like anything Londoners had encountered before. The Houses of Parliament, built directly on the bank of the Thames, were forced to hang curtains soaked in chloride of lime over the windows to make the building usable. It didn't work. Parliament abandoned the building. The newspapers called it the Great Stink. Within 18 days, Parliament had approved funding for a city-wide sewer system, something engineers had been requesting for years. It took a smell so bad it shut down the government to make them act. The man given the job was Joseph Bazalgette. He built 1,100 miles of street sewers, 82 miles of underground intercepting sewers. He moved 300 million bricks. And when he was finished, he doubled the thickness of the walls because, he said, he didn't know when anyone would have the chance to do this again. His sewers are still in use today. The flush toilet existed long before anyone used it. A working flushing toilet was patented in 1775 by Alexander Cumming. A plumber named Thomas Crapper later improved the design and sold it widely across Britain. His name was on the tanks. Soldiers in the First World War saw his name on toilets across England. They brought the slang home. But the toilet alone wasn't enough. Without sewers, a flush toilet just moved the problem somewhere closer. What changed everything was Bazalgette's sewers, clean water infrastructure, and the slow, grudging realization that waste and drinking water should not share the same river. In 1854, a doctor named John Snow had already proven that cholera spread through contaminated water, not bad air. Nobody believed him for years. The Great Stink made them believe. 4 years later, London started building. It took 7,000 years of human civilization, from Mohenjo-daro to Victorian London, to solve a problem every person on Earth had, every single day. And it only happened because the smell got bad enough that the people making the decisions couldn't ignore it anymore.